Wonderful. Then I can now hand over to Elliot to open the final bit of today.
Hello. Hello, hello, hopefully. That's as good as it gets. Okay, excellent. Well, it's fantastic to be here. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Elliot Trahan, and I work at City Hall, where I lead on transport and infrastructure and air quality. So lots of really interesting and important things for this assembly over the last few days. I'm really, really pleased to be presenting this session. And what we are going to be talking about is resilient streets for kids. So trying to look at streets through the perspective of kids and some of the activities that we as cities, and we've got two fantastic representatives, one from Milan and one from Paris, and a little bit of me from London, can do to improve, protect, and promote active travel by kids, including things like school streets. So we're going to have two relatively short presentations, and then we're going to have a bit of a discussion. And so I would just also like to introduce, although they'll come on stage in a moment and do their presentations, the two kind of guest speakers that we've got today. The first is Demetrio Scopoletti from Milan, who will be presenting first. And then we've got Chiara Molinar from Paris, who will present second. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Demetrio.
Thank you very much. And I'm sorry Mike is not here anymore, but in the words of Nelson Mandela, that then became the words of Zoran Mamdani, it always seems impossible until it's done. What was impossible? For me, it was impossible to believe 8 years ago that we would have been able to establish a tactical urbanism program in Milan, a collaborative one, that was able to reclaim more than 60 public spaces and half of them next to schools. But when we talk about something that is not possible, it looks that it is because change has to overcome resistances, the peaks of hysteria, as Alexander was telling before. I didn't know his fantastic curve, but I used a formula, which is in order to overcome resistance, which is, of course, just a peak, we need three factors. One is dissatisfaction for how things are now. The second one is vision for a better future. And the third, the more important one, that we always forget, the first step, initiative. Dissatisfaction is evident. I mean, we won't be here if we were satisfied about how our streets and how our streets are for kids. This is my kid, and bringing him to school every day is a nightmare and should be the best moment of our day. The vision, well, you will find it in any document from any city. It's very easy to write, right? We need better cities, greener one, more sustainable, more resilient for kids. But how we can really put that into action with instruments like public works, which are incredibly slow if you're not Paris, which are incredibly frustrating because they cost a lot. They're not flexible. And we need other instruments like tactical urbanism that can help us transforming places in a light, quick and cheap way in just weeks with few money and with being more radical because you can always come back if it doesn't work. But we are also starting and considering the tactical urbanism is too slow. Sometimes we just need temporary activation that can help us creating the space for more engaging streets. This is a play kit. It's basically 2 cargo bikes that we created full of games for kids. The city can bring you in order to activate the space if you are a community. And this is part of an incremental approach that is transforming our streets, and particularly our school streets, through time with a middle phase, an interim phase, that allow us to not discuss and face the peak of hysteria in the presentation project phase, but understanding how the project can work through time by really engaging people in living experience. We didn't start this as a school street program. We started the program as a couple of pilots, starting from this car parking lot for 25 cars, that by changing perspective, we will be able to transform in really 3 weeks of works, thanks to the collaboration of Sky Duncan, GDCI, and Janet Sadiq-Khan, in one of the most incredible party places I've ever been. And the first immediate reaction that we had when we transformed the place is that kids started popping up immediately. but we didn't know where they were. And then we starting pilot after pilot to understand what kind of capacity we had, and we faced this intersection. And again, this is exactly what a city for cars looks like, right? But this is exactly what a city for people can look like. And it doesn't cost much, and it's not impossible. It's just a matter of will and imagination and change of perspective. And place by place, experiment after experiment, we started understanding that maybe this could be more than just a series of pilots. And we delivered a program based on open calls for citizens. We've been asking citizens, where do you want to collaborate with the city, with the institution, in order to create tactical urbanism projects? We thought we got more, we couldn't get more than 10, 15 proposals, and we got 65 the first time in 2019. And we established a process that brings citizens not to be frustrated asking for something that never happens, but to be part of a process where they can implement, together with us, the transformation of a place. They present projects to the city, physically. We allow them to present physically the projects, which is the minimum stage. Then we let them present to the community. We start co-design processes with them. And once everything is set up, we sign a collaboration pact. We say, okay, this is our contract. We do the transformation, you do the activation, you do the care, you implement the coloration, the painting of the space, and you take care. Not just in terms of maintenance, but in terms of putting your eyes on the space, on the streets, monitoring it. And this brought us to transform places like this, car parking paradise into dancing heavens, piazza squares in the middle of historic neighborhoods transformed by artists, school streets or school roundabouts like these into places where people could gather together and could transform these places into playgrounds every day, at least twice a day. And when we started implementing projects in front of schools, we realized this could become a policy, a school street policy. And then we launched a second open call dedicated to school streets. And again, we thought maybe we can get 20, 30, 40 proposals. And we got 87 in 3 months, and asking for 110 projects, facing something like 250 schools. Just imagine a city making a question to its community saying, do you want school streets? And all the schools saying, yes. You should try. And places like these have been transformed in places like this. And I mean, the change is really impressive. And it happens every day. This picture is taken by Ilaria, which is somewhere in the room, or maybe out of the room. Ciao, Ilaria. At 8:10 a.m. in the morning. Have you ever saw a party at 8 a.m. in the morning, which is not a rave? And this has become, for instance, a place, a symbolic place for the school community in the city, and created emulation, and Ilaria is now representatives of a huge community of people asking for this kind of change. And we replicated, and we transformed place after place. We understood very simple things like cars don't play out of schools, kids do. If there isn't a playground in front of your school, we just can invent one, transforming a redundant car parking or a street. And if there is already one, like in this place, well, you can easily expand. And the main question is, after we implemented a 5,000 square meter school neighborhood project in the last months, should we bring kids to park after school, or we should bring the park next to schools? What's easier? What's more 15-minute city? And to go ahead and to finalize, we're not closing school streets to cars, as Alexander was saying before. We are opening that up to people, and the program is called Piazze Aperte, Open Squares. People, they use the space in the most incredible ways you can even imagine. People is the legacy. What's next of this project? I always ask myself, after 8 years, what is next? We do more? We do 300 projects? Well, Paris did it, but we do 300, 400, 500, or maybe we just create a community of people that can believe that transforming streets is easier than what they think. That they can establish collaborative processes and allow imagination to transform places, to make change happening. Rethinking streets as relational infrastructure. Streets don't move cars. streets make people encounter. And engaging people through life experience, not just on paper, and multiplying the impact and the political impact that we all have. Not just because we want to deliver more projects. Of course, we are challenging city after city, and we would like to be the best, but the main thing is really creating the stronger community possible that can strive for change. And there is no better community we should look for, and we should think to, in order to leave the world, the cities, a better place than the one we found, than the kids. Kids are 100% of our future, no matter if it's few part of the population. So what we learn is that streets are public spaces. Public spaces for people, and people build communities. And if you want to transform your school streets, and if you want to transform your communities and your neighborhoods starting from schools, you just have to create those communities, to empower them, to listen to them, and to make them louder than the people resisting and saying no. Thanks.
Hi, everybody. So now it's about Paris. Yes, it works. So in Paris, it was said, I think everybody knows what we realized with this school street programs is 300 streets delivered in a few years, and hundreds of them completely redesigned. So often we are asked, how was it possible? And we are also asking ourselves, how was it possible? We are still not believing it's real. And we often hear it's a matter of money. We had, they say, yeah, but Paris had big investments in public space. And of course, it was a matter of money. But I will try to highlight other factors, which are, I think, more important than money to implement this kind of program. So first factor is a very clear urban vision about what our cities has to be to face to climate change. When the School Street program was launched after the pandemic, we already have all these ecological issues as a priority. So we were immediately asked to find streets to be planted, and so that we can really create a permanent transformation of public space. It was just not about safer streets for kids, of course it was, but the climatic issue and adaptation was really a priority. So we can use some recent studies about the benefits of planting trees, but also about the potential of planting public space in Paris. And we really had to invent a new way to work, to find solution. So the Street School program became an opportunity to rethink the streets for tomorrow or for today, because it's actually 40 degrees in Paris. So we tested solution you can see on these pictures about planting trees, about having light-colored surfaces, about putting fountains to have access to water, but also misting systems, this kind of solution. And we have pretty good results because we can prove that we have about 5 degrees, 5 temperature less hot in this street school with this kind of solution than in other streets. Another big factor is about mobility. At the beginning, the Street School program is not about making kids walking to school, because in Paris they were already walking to school, because we have a very good network of public school, and every child has a public school in a 5 or 7 minutes walk. So it was not really the goal of the program. The goal of the program is about health, about giving space to kids, and not just to kids. But it became a mobility issue, but because when you have to pedestrianize dozens of streets, of course, you have to consider the impact on mobility, not to create congestion. And we already had lots of previous policies, and we were very useful because we already had, for example, we had a parking reform which aimed to reduce 50% the number of on-street parking. And as you can see in the picture, it was exactly what we did to plant in the street school. There you can see these previous states with all the cars parked on the streets, and then where you had cars before, now we have trees and green and vegetation. That was possible also because of these previous mobility policies that we had during the last 10, 15, maybe 20 years. So this program is a very fast program, but we can capitalize on all this work that was done before. And we now have in Paris less car dependency than 20 years ago. We have 60% decrease in motorized traffic, and we have just a third of the households having a car. So this is also why this program was possible. And in the inner Paris, the most of the journeys are made walking, and we have nowadays more trips made by bike than by car. So this mobility transition is really on the way, and the active mobilities is really getting more and more powerful. And what is interesting is also that the street school program was the opportunity to scale up these mobility policies, to implement the parking reform, as I already said, but also to be the starting point to reflect on new mobility patterns at the neighborhood scale. So it's a result and it's a starting point at the same time. Another factor is that Paris is a really dense city, and it's a proximity-based city where it's the perfect 15-minute city, we could say, with lots of amenities and facilities and shops, everything you could look for in a walkable distance. And the schools in this network has a real great place that citizens want to prioritize. So we had a real ask to have good places in front of school. Also because because of the density of Paris, I think we are one of the most dense cities in Europe. We have about 20,000 inhabitants per square kilometers. So we have small apartments because it's expensive. We have no outdoor spaces, private spaces, because of the typology of buildings in Paris. So we have a real problem of lack of space. And this is also an answer. These streets are the living room, the public living room for lots of people. And as you can see, they became a place where people can meet, not just kids, it's not just for kids, it's for families, it's for elderly people, it's for everybody. And this program became the opportunity to change our approach to planning and to have really to develop a neighborhood scale approach, which started with the School Street program, and then we developed for bigger implementations. Another factor, one more, which explained how we could implement this program so fast, it was the standardization of the processes and of design solutions. All the street schooling program are very similar one to the other, so you can say it's a little lack of creativity, but we adapt to every different context, but we have the same materials, we have the same furnitures, and this is to optimize the decision-making process, so we do not have to validate for every street the kind of furniture or the kind of material. It's validate one time forever, and it also accelerated the implementation and simplified the maintenance. So it's very important for the next years also. And this was the main reason to this standardization, but we can see also the effects of this visual identity, which helps to recognize the street school everywhere in Paris. You can be in the very center of Paris in very elegant neighborhood, or you can be in popular districts, and it's always the same. So it's also a kind of equity between different areas of Paris, and it's also it also helps to realize that you are in a pedestrian priority area. Nowadays, it's very legible and it's very easy to recognize you are in a school street in Paris. So it helps to respect the rules of these areas. And these are, we think, some of the reasons that helps to develop this program in a just few years, in just the previous term, so 4 or 5 years. So, thank you.
Wow, please. Thank you so much. Is this working? There we go, excellent. So they were both very inspiring presentations, and for someone who works in the city government in London, a little bit depressing as a reminder of how much more we need to do in London, but we've got time for a few questions. I was just going to start off with one while perhaps the audience warms up in case anyone wants to ask one from the audience. I'm also going to sit down because it's a very hot day. And my question was going to be around, there was a lot in there around engagement and around co-design, but I know from experience in London that sometimes you get, although lots of parents and people in the public support these kind of schemes, other people don't. Parents sometimes want to be able to drop their kids off at school by car and they want the convenience, and you sometimes get quite a lot of pushback. So how did you manage that in your process? Demetrio, let's start with you.
Well, I think that Alexander before told about these peaks of hysteria, as a resistance, as a peak, as a moment of resistance that don't last for long. Reality is that it's exactly what's happening almost always in our projects in Milan. You do a lot of public meetings and engagement, nobody really cares. Then when it's about starting the implementation, you take out car parks, people understand something is happening, and they understand something is happening because we put signatures saying, you cannot park here anymore. And say, wow, we should react. And in that moment when you're just implemented the first transformation, made the space free, etc., people react and start complaining about everything, and they started saying, yeah, you didn't ask us anything. Yeah, but there was a public meeting. Yeah, but I didn't know. And these kind of things. Should we listen to these people reacting because they want to keep the status quo in a place, in a world, in cities that are not livable anymore? Or we should just make them adapting to the new and to something that is better? I'm not a politician, but to be honest, no way. They should adapt. So if you want to bring your kids by car, maybe this is not the best way you can move and bring your kid in a school in 2026 in a big city in Europe. Is this something that we can easily say like that? Maybe not. But of course, by taking measures that makes it more difficult for people to do something like that and show the other ones playing before schools or after schools and engaging and having fun, maybe they will change their mind. It's a process, it's not immediate, but we cannot think that we can make everyone happy. This is this topic.
Okay, that's really helpful.
Yeah, I don't think in Paris we have a pushback now about the street school program. It's mostly the opposite. Lots of demands to have more street school. And the opposition was more important in the beginning of the program. When we started, we had people saying, I heard myself, I prefer the noise of a car to the noise of a kid. So we had this kind of reaction. It was in the beginning, and I think the best answer of our city was to develop the program. And when we started having 10, 20, 30, 40, and everybody was seeing it was pretty beautiful, and there were people using them everywhere. It was harder to say, I don't want it, because kids make noise in public space. So the answer was to continue the program.
I, from London's experience, when we've done things, I really agree with all of that in terms of absolutely when you introduce something, there's normally a period in the run-up to it where people are really nervous, and then once it comes in and they get used to it, if it's an improvement, they often love it and can't imagine life without it. But until it's there, you get a lot of opposition and concern. Now, is there anyone in the audience? I can see. Wow. Okay. Popular topic. I think I saw this gentleman over there first. So let's go to him.
Thanks. Roger Geffen from the Low Traffic Future Alliance. Question for Demetrio. I love, well, both speakers, I love what you're doing. Forgive me a bit of a devil's advocate question, if I may, Demetrio. You talked about effectively crowdsourcing, inviting communities to come forward with proposals. And I know that what would tend to happen, I suspect in Milan as much as in a British city, is you tend to get responses more from sort of more middle class and affluent communities, and therefore you end up with the risk that it becomes seen to be sort of, oh, this is all very well for the affluent neighbours. Why are you ignoring the sort of more downtrodden, poorer neighbourhoods? Have you had that problem, and if so, what have you done to mitigate that risk?
Let's say that, well, of course, engagement is not as democratic as it should be. I mean, it's not just making a question. It doesn't mean that everyone can respond or can respond in the same way. And it's definitely true that communities that are more organized and maybe more informed have more access. But when it's about receiving proposals and putting priority to those, we of course consider also the fact that we can work and we want to work out of the center. We want to work in neighborhoods and particularly in suburbs and try to be democratic in the establishment of what is the priority. We collaborate with the boroughs. We have 9 boroughs in Milan. They prioritize the spaces. But then again, we have to start from somewhere. Done is better than perfect. So if I have to say, if it's better to start from those neighborhoods that are more ready to accept or don't do, I would always start from the neighborhoods that are more ready to accept and then expanding and creating sense of emulation. And honestly, in our experience is also that project by project, you really create this community and sense of want to get something that is in the neighborhood next to yours. You know what I mean? And there are areas where the projects are so many, neighborhood after neighborhood, that creates a network of spaces. That's probably the final outcome in terms of space transformation in terms of the project.
And Chiara, just before we move on to the next question, what's that experience with equity and fairness and making sure it's not just the richest and the loudest communities in Paris that benefit? How do you achieve that fair spread?
In Paris, it was this program was kind of top-down program. The decision to pedestrianize in front of school was a political decision, and we have to develop the technical level. And we didn't wait families to ask for street school. Some of them were already asking for them, and of course they have been prioritized, but we also made this kind of program where there were no demand from families, maybe because the families have other priorities, and it's not that they don't care about public space, but they have other problems to solve. So it was a kind of equity, because in every district and in every neighborhood, we try to have this kind of solution. And it changed completely the map of pedestrian areas in Paris. Before this program, we were pedestrianizing mostly in the city center, in heritage areas, in commercial areas, so mostly for economical reason. And it changed completely this aspect of pedestrianization. It's a really people-based pedestrianization program everywhere.
Excellent, wonderful. The lady with the sunglasses on your head, there you go.
Thank you very much. I'm Charlotte, and thank you so much for the speeches. What approaches have you considered for longer term maintenance and stewardship and engagement of children and the wider neighbourhoods?
Demetrio, do you want to go first?
Or engagement of kids in general terms, or about the process? Okay, the city is maintaining the tactical urbanism projects. It's not so difficult to maintain, to be honest. You have to be structured, and once you get the right contracts and the right people to do it, it's not that difficult. But we are also trying to, of course, transform them into permanent. 10-15% of the projects are already transformed permanently, like, the same way Paris is doing, with renewing the paving, with greenery, etc. What we're doing in terms of engagement is we signed this collaboration pact with the community that lasts for maximum 3 years, and then it can be renewed. When you really define mutual responsibility with pieces of community. And the other thing that we are doing is that in the transformation of projects, we are, of course, monitoring and also transforming the spaces, co-designing them with kids, particularly to what is related to playgrounds and to playful elements that we want to choose. I'm not sure I asked your question. Not at all.
Sorry, after the project's complete, the longer term maintenance and revenue and stewardship, what has your approach been for that? Because it sounds like there's opportunities to engage children, not just in the co-design, but actually also the opportunities to steward or maintain or engage them. So, for example, growing plants or watering or these longer term things which would then reduce revenue burden for local authorities, etc.
Well, to be honest, engaging kids in watering plants, in big planters, I don't recommend it. Honestly speaking, it's really not something that, even when we tried communities maintaining the space physically, results were not always so great, because we saw that there was maximum 1 year capability to keep it at the right rhythm as is needed in order to maintain a space. August and warm months, people in Italy just go on holiday, and this is something that not always works. So we shifted a bit the taking care from the proper maintaining part, which is not that expensive though for a city, to the activation side. The city can maintain the space, but it's very difficult for the city to activate it. While by facilitating the activation procedures, the main effort of citizens now is really activating the space with programs, with activities involving kids, etc. And to be honest, in the evolution of the project, we think this is much better in terms of mutual collaboration.
Chiara, did you want to come back with Paris's, how do you engage children long-term in these projects?
In some of the schools, most of them, we have meetings with children, not to select the streets to pedestrianize, but to imagine the streets of tomorrow. It was a little theoretical exercise, and as I told about design choice, they were made by the municipality, so we couldn't really ask them, what do you want, where do you want to plant the tree, because we just have one option, to plant a tree for technical reasons. So it's not this kind of technical question that we can have with kids. But we had a work about their imagination, and I think it's very interesting, this kind of exercise, because we changed their way to see the streets. It's not just for cars, it's not just for mobility, it's for living. So I don't think there were an immediate impact to the design, but I think it can help to change the mind.
And of course, the kids end up using and enjoying these spaces and playing in them, and that all helps. I was actually at a school yesterday where absolutely, as part of their school street, the kids, there's a big kind of planter box, and part of their job is to maintain that. So I completely understand your point around what is the opportunity of actually getting, their enthusiasm for this for the long term. The man in the green shirt.
Thank you. Question for Demetrio. I think your before and after photos were really striking, particularly the use of colour. And I'm also aware that the Parisian examples were much more sort of restrained and a little bit more muted in their colour, but they were also more the final version. And I know your temporary tactical urbanism was the approach there. The question is, can you do that tactical temporary one without the bright colour? Because there's communities I've worked with but just run a mile from the bright patchwork of spots and dots, and they'd find it inappropriate for maybe a more heritage area. So have you done anything in Milan that didn't involve bright paint?
Well, to be honest, color is just a tool, not the goal. So we can easily do projects without painting. And the funny thing is, when we are not painting, or when we're not painting immediately, people, and particularly kids, color the space themselves. But then, nothing to say in respect of heritage, but heritage nowadays maybe is the one that doesn't allow us to put trees in front of monuments in places. Maybe it's the one that didn't allow us to put some playgrounds in places that are bounded. Maybe we should just overcome that concept. Just a question.
Do you want it? So the other gentleman in green in the middle. And then we'll have one more question, and then we'll have to wrap up.
Thanks very much. Amandeep from Impact on Urban Health. One quick question. Did you do any internal air quality monitoring in the classrooms where the school streets were put? And what sort of treatments did you do on arterial roads where you couldn't close the entire road?
We did some monitoring about the air quality, and we had positive results, of course. At the same time, I'm convinced, 100% convinced, and I would put it in an European law tomorrow morning, and please, let's create a campaign for this. That school streets should be a law, should be an European law. Everyone, sorry for UK, but we can make a global law. But we should really, it's a matter of civilization. We should take out cars far from schools. Maybe 10 years adaptation program, so you can move traffic somewhere else, but we should do it. If you cannot do it now, our air expert says that we should put ventilation systems inside the school. What's the easier thing? What's easier? Take out cars or put ventilation inside schools? What's the more effective? I have no doubts. We should get rid of cars as much as possible and as soon as possible, particularly starting from school areas. No brainer.
Chiara, and just maybe to give you the last word.
Yeah, just to answer on the air quality in the classrooms, we had some good results in some schools where we developed street school, and we had a decrease of pollution up to 30% in the classroom, so it's pretty encouraging. So I think it's a good answer, and it's a good encouragement to continue.
Excellent. Now, I've been told very firmly that has to be our last question. Apologies, because there were so many, but I just so impressed and inspired, and I think that's part of the key takeaway for so many people who've come today is to actually to see what's happening elsewhere around the world and to come and apply that in their own communities. So thank you so much. A round of applause, please.